Welcome back to the Burrows of Berea. I am Rick Welch. And folks, I have a very, very cool guest. This is somebody that I heard about, then I finally met at the Berean Bible Church Conference. This was a couple years ago, I think. And she is a friend of a lot of you who actually watch this and listen to this. It is my dear friend, Shan Morgan. Good morning, Shan.
Good morning. How are you?
Great. And it is so nice to see you there with your Arkansas shirt on and you got your cup of
Uh,
coffee on this brisk, cool Christmas morning. It's not Christmas Day, but in our Christmas season.
it is. Merry Christmas to you and all your listeners.
Yes, a lot of them you know, our friends Marchessa and Mike and Sue
Yes,
Green and the
yes,
Curtis family and all of them that we
yes.
all. So I have
Robin,
asked,
C. Irwin, yeah,
yeah, that's right.
Zach.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of us here down in the bunker.
That's right. There's only 14 of you from what I understand.
Well, we're growing, I will say. We are growing.
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed that. I've seen it grow throughout the
Yeah,
country. It's been great.
it's been awesome to see.
Yes, absolutely. So I've asked you to come on because I want to hear your personal testimony, and I want for myself and for our listeners to get to know you a little bit. So I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask everybody that comes on for a testimony episode. Can you tell me the earliest memory that you have of when you heard the name Jesus Christ?
I knew you were going to ask this, and I cannot come up with any specific, you know, moment in time. Not that, I mean, Jesus wasn't even a household name when I was a kid or growing up in my broken family.
Hmm.
But I did have a lot of influences in my life. I had several aunts who loved the Lord, and um, so they were very influential in taking me to church. And, if I heard the name of Jesus, I heard it from them. And but I do recall one specific summer. Um, I was probably about 10. I know I was older than 9 because my dad suddenly died when I was 9 years old from a massive heart attack. And so I know it was after that I was kind of at I don't know if it was a VBS or if it was just like in children's church or what it was. That my memory is not quite, but I did um, become a believer in Christ at that point through that vacation Bible school or children's church sermon. And I think when I've thought about that over the years, I think I realize now as an adult looking back that since I had lost my daddy at such a young age, and I was a daddy's girl, and
Right. Mm.
so I fished with my daddy. I thought my dad was a professional fisherman when I was growing up. I mean,
Right. Don't we all
that's
think our
what
dad are the great white hunters or the great white
yeah,
fishers, right?
exactly. But I think I more or less was looking for a daddy, you know.
Hmm.
And so I'm sure, it was Jesus was presented to me as my father and a good father. And I think that's what drew me to to him at that moment. Of course, by the work of the Holy Spirit, I believe, you know. But yeah,
Sure.
that was my first um, real memory of something that happened in my life with Jesus that turned my life around or that saved me at that point. Uh,
Whenever you were so did your aunts take you to church prior to the death of your father?
not so much.
Okay.
Not so much. I mean, we lived in a small town here in Arkansas, and like I said, I came from a broken home, so my we moved we moved quite a bit,
Hmm.
and so I never had roots. I was, I'll put it that way. I never had just really good foundational roots as far as family immediate family. Um,
Mhm.
my mom came from a really uh, hard life. She was one of 10 kids, and they were, I mean, they were poorer than dirt, to put it lightly. But um, so I never really had this a stable upbringing. I didn't have the, the leave it to Beaver upbringing at all.
Right. Yeah.
At all. It was pretty chaotic at times. Um, so, but my aunts did, I did go to church with them. I had cousins, their kids were my same age. In fact, both of my aunts that were very influential in my life, their sons both became ministers and still in the ministry. And, so I was always around church. I was always in and out of church with them at points in my life. If I was at their house, I went to church with
Hmm.
them.
Right.
So
Yeah. So after the death of your father and you really begin to see, like you said, Jesus as your father, you
yeah.
start to look to God in that way. And you said you were 9 when that took place, when that started.
When he passed away, I was 9, so it was sometime after that.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was definitely after he passed away. And like I said, I had a broken home at that time that my dad had died. My parents were separated, and my mom was working 2 jobs. We were left alone, really. I had an older sister at the time. She was 2.5 years older than me. We were left alone a lot.
Right.
And
Kind of latchkey kids.
we were, um, we were worse than latchkey. I don't even know if we had a lock on our door.
Right.
Seriously. Fact, funny story, I drove by my old house that we lived in when we were growing up, and we didn't live there long. Like I said, we kind of hopped around. And it was still literally still standing by a stick, basically. A two by
Wow.
four was holding it up. And so, when you go back and you look at where you came from, those memories just start flooding back to your mind, and uh,
Yeah.
good or bad.
So okay, so now that you've been introduced to him and it's through your aunts and knowing that your cousins will eventually get into ministry, take me from that moment. So, do you believe that that is your salvation moment, or is there some time whenever it really started to click with you?
Yeah. I would say yes, that was my salvation moment because that's the thing I remember and I go back to over and over and over again.
Hmm.
And but you know, salvation is a process. Our It's a progression. The work that Christ does in our life is a progression, experience wise. And so, you know, it was a it was a roller coaster, you know, from that point up until where I think God has me now. But well, like I said, I came from a broken family, but I was also an abused child. I was sexually abused as a child um, by people who were close to me in my family. Um, and then people who weren't, people who I didn't even know. I
Mm.
mean, I know it happened. I just don't recognize their faces or know their names or anything, even a teacher um, at one point.
My goodness.
Yeah. So,
And how
you know,
old were you when this
this was
began?
um, from what I can remember, because the thing is, Rick, when you're abused as a child, your memories just become, you know, just a bunch of gobbledygook. You don't know where you started. You almost don't even know where your life started. It's so
See,
just so
I
messed
have that
up.
in common with you. I've shared that in my testimony. I was
Yeah,
sexually
I know you
abused at the
have.
age of 5,
Mhm.
and then again at the age of 10. And so, well, actually, end of my age 9. So I know that. I know exactly what you're talking about. The only reason that I can know the ages is because I remember where I was and in relationship to school. And so that's how I was able to pinpoint it. But yeah,
Right.
once that opens up, when a lot of people who have never been abused don't understand when our sexuality was opened up at such a young age, it created this nightmare scenario of us trying to navigate the world because we didn't know why we were having these weird feelings and what was going on. And we were, for me, just acting out, maybe trying to touch a girl or something at school, I would get in trouble. But
Mhm.
I was really just living out this experience that had been happening to me. And no one obviously was recognizing that. And so, yeah. So for you, this was happening, I'm assuming, by males.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And the thing about it is, it happened repeatedly, and people say, "Well, why didn't you tell someone?"
Hmm.
That's kind of the common question. Why didn't you say something? And these are people you trusted. These are people who are loved by the people that love you. You know what
That's
I'm
right.
saying? And
Yes.
so that's not a easy, there's never an easy answer to that question.
Hmm.
And then I think as time goes on, especially as you get a little older, like I did, just the shame of it all, it really does, um, it holds you back from anything
Hmm.
that in good that you want to do in your life. Um, and so, you know, I mean, honestly, I never expected to talk about this, but I guess God had other plans, and here we are.
Yeah.
But and it's not something I think about constantly, or that I've ever like, oh well, I want to you know write a book or help other people who have gone through this similar thing. But there are times when God's used my testimony, in a personal way to some individual, and I know that it has helped them. Um, I think the shame part is one of the biggest common things that we have is that you feel like you've done something, maybe you deserve that, because I think as kids, we know how mischief we are, we know how bad we are, we know how, disobedient we are. So in our minds, we're like, well, I must have done something then
Sure.
to have
Yeah.
caused that. Excuse me, when that's not the case at all. And it never is the case. Never. So yeah, that part of my childhood, it's like it's blocked out.
Hmm.
It's
You've
almost like
compartmentalized it.
you
That's
do.
what we do to
Yeah,
protect ourselves.
you do. You block out certain aspects of your childhood. And because you do that, then that carries over to other blocks of your life
Hmm.
that you look at, or I look at and I think, who was that person? You know,
Right. Yes.
yeah, who is that? And so
Did you notice as you got older how that compartmentalized part of your life was affecting other relationships in your life?
sure. Oh, sure. Always.
Hmm.
Marriage,
Yes.
relationship with my kids. And I
Hmm.
tell you, for me, and I know every situation is different. Um, Everybody processes this and regains themselves back different ways. But for me, it was when I had my children, when I had my girls. It was almost, it was like, okay, this is the point you have to deal with this. This is
Right.
this is the time that you've got to deal with the things that the shame, the guilt, um, even it was just easier to lie about my life than it was to tell the truth about it for some reason. But again, I think it goes back to shame. It goes back to, you don't want someone that you tell to accuse you of anything. So it's easier just not to say anything. And
I found that I could, like when you mentioned lying, it really resounded with me because that was something that I was doing as well. I was trying to misdirect and to keep people from looking at what the truth was usually. Because I mean, I grew up dirt poor too. We didn't,
yeah,
you know, we didn't
you're
have,
hiding. You're
yeah,
hiding.
you're
You know.
hiding that. And then also when you take that with the sexual abuse and the verbal abuse and the physical abuse and all of the things that came on top of that,
Mhm.
to you definitely didn't want people to know that about your situation. You want people to look at you and respect you, but you don't even respect yourself. You don't respect the situation you're in. It is a nightmare
Exactly.
scenario. And then
It is.
to have God and introduced for me as a child, wanting the love of Jesus was such a critical thing for me that I latched onto it. And then it was later in life when I started looking at the sovereignty of God that really threw me for a loop because I was like, okay, so wait a minute. So you love me, but yet all of this happened to me. Now, how does this work? Like, did you ever go through any of that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But I will say, I've always, I didn't know it was the sovereignty of God. I didn't put a word to it, but I've always in my life, for some reason, felt like God's grace was always there for me.
Hmm.
And one thing, I went through a lot of counseling. Sometimes, that helps. Sometimes it makes it worse. Just depends on the counselor and how their approach is. But I had, I don't know if he was a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but anyway, I had to take a test. I don't know if you've ever been to a psychologist where you have to take, you had to take a test, and it's really geared toward people who have been sexually abused as children. And so I can't even tell you what the questions were, but I answered the questions, and I decided I'm going to answer these honestly. You know, I'm going to answer this honestly. And so the next session, when I went back, he looked at me and he said, I don't see many women who come out of what you came out of who aren't prostitutes on the street right now,
Mm.
or
Wow.
who hadn't been that. And I'm telling you, that hit me. I'll never forget that. And I walked out of there and I just thank God, you know.
Yeah.
That was my moment where I just thank God that thank you for protecting me in that way.
Hmm.
And so I
Out of
just,
curiosity, when you said that, do you have a heart for those women that actually went into prostitution or were in that? Most likely they were abused, and most,
oh, no doubt,
and
no
so
doubt.
like no judgment for me, man. Like when I see there, you're not going to see an ounce of
No,
judgment for me in the lifestyle that they chose or whatever it is that was chose
no.
for them. I can see how easily that could happen to just anyone. Just like you said, from yourself, family, people that you love and that loved you, that were loved by the people that love you. These are the people that are the cause that this psychologist or psychiatrist would have said most people would have went into prostitution because of this. So
Yeah.
that's why whenever I see people like that, like, oh, my heart just breaks for them and I just want to love them.
Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Prostitution, drugs, whatever you want to call, whatever you see, that there's such a brokenness behind all of that.
Hmm.
And a lot of it is from sexual abuse, physical abuse, or mental abuse,
Hmm.
some type of abuse in their childhood.
Yes.
I have a dear nephew, my sister's son, who the same situation, he was molested as a child and
Mm.
got into drugs, alcohol, went to prison. And, you know, and I know it's nothing but the grace of God that kept me away from that and out of that. And,
Yes.
and so the sovereignty of God is to me that, basically God can do whatever he wants to do, and he will do what, but it's the purpose is to bring him glory in his, you know, and so
It almost sounds
I
weird to say
never
it that
doubt
way, doesn't it? It
it
sounds weird
does.
to say that. Like when I've spoken to people, and yes, I went through cognitive behavioral therapy. It was a secular version, and I told everybody it saved my life. I believe that that was ordained by God for me to go through that, and I did. But to say things like you just said is by the grace of God. Now, let's say it in a sentence because it's going to sound weird. By the grace of God, I had been molested and then came through. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait a minute. Say that,
Right,
right?
right,
It's difficult
right.
to say it with your mouth, but once you've experienced it and you've come through and you see the good on the other side of it, it is mind blowing, but it's possible. And by the Spirit, we
It
see it.
is.
It is a
Yes,
very bizarre thing, but I can attest to this. Yes. Some
right.
evil came upon me, but God turned it into my good, and that happened.
Exactly. 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 And you know, I don't dwell on that, of course.
Sure,
You
sure.
know, it's not something you know, I think about constantly. I talk about, you know, if anything, I probably don't talk about it enough. Um, you know, and then I feel a little guilty for not sharing because I know that it could probably help someone else who's been through the same thing and pull them closer to God.
Mhm.
But you know, I'm just kind of, you know, I have a full life.
Of course, there's more to it than, yeah. I mean, obviously, we're not going to just stay here in your testimony, but it does shape you. It happened early
Yes.
on. It's
Yeah.
going to affect some of the choices that you're going to make later in life. That is for sure. So it's good
For
to get
sure.
that on the ground. And yes,
Yeah.
those of us who have been abused, we understand it better after through years, whether it's through therapy or just life experience or whatever. We have the ability to possibly talk and help and coach somebody through a similar situation or help other people prevent being in those kinds of situations because of what we know. But
Right.
that isn't the whole of who we are. It's a part of who we are.
Exactly. And, you know, it's not, like I said, it's not something I dwell on. There are moments when I'll think about it. Something will come up and, um, but I feel like, you know, that's just kind of part of my life where I've dealt with it and I've moved on. And,
Right.
so,
So
and
whenever
just
you
like with
dealt with
every
it,
other,
sorry, I didn't mean
I
to
was just
interrupt
gonna
you.
say, just like with other things, you know, when you go through a divorce, you have to deal with all the emotions,
Mhm.
you know, everything that goes with that, with your children, helping your children, and you face it and you deal with it, and then you move on. God moves you on.
So by saying, so did you go through a divorce?
I did. I
Yeah, so
did.
did I. Yeah, so did I. I had, oh, and by the way, if you hear any noises, Shan told us that she's having work done on her home. And so it's quite possible you'll hear some noise, but just ignore it like we're going to.
Yeah, they
So,
just pulled up. So yeah,
yeah, so
you never know. Maybe the
you,
loud part got over with yesterday.
and maybe so. So so let's just talk about that for a minute, just out of curiosity. So you get married. Is this when you have your children? Is in your first marriage?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And
and you have
I
two
married.
children?
I do. I had two daughters.
Hmm.
And my first marriage, my daughter's dad, we were married, and he was a preacher's kid, and you know, his dad, my girls were saved. His dad was the preacher. My girls were saved in the church. They were baptized by him, and lovely family, um, just a wonderful family. Uh, and they're both gone. But even after we were divorced, you know, we were still so close. I was so close to them, and they, you know, they loved me even after, you know, I wasn't their daughter-in-law anymore.
Yes, it's
And
nice whenever people can actually do that.
oh yeah,
Hmm.
and so anyway, I raised my girls basically as a single mom. And I mean, he was in the picture, no doubt, but they still lived with me, and you know, I took care of everything and um, ran them to school and activities, and you know, just the usual things. Working a full time job, And then
Was church a part of your life after the divorce?
yes, always a part of my life, and my children's lives. But funny story that I'd kind of like to talk about. This was before my first husband and I got married. I dated my husband that passed away after I met you at the
Hmm.
Berean conference. We dated before we had ever gotten married, and we went out several times. And I met him at church, really through a relative of mine. And so he was actually my Sunday school teacher. you know,
Oh, wow.
we did music together. Uh, you know, we just had a great time together. Went to concerts together, fairs, and he was about 6 years older than me. I was 20 at the time, and he was 26.
Hmm.
And so we dated, and I always told him, I said, "You broke my heart." And he was like, "No, you broke my heart." I'm like, "No, no, I think it was the other way around." But
Hmm.
anyway, long story short, we actually did not get together in the sense that married or anything. But after I divorced and after he divorced years later, our children are adults. He had 4 kids, and of course I had 2 daughters. And God just brought us back together 30
Hmm.
something years later. And
Yeah, that's precious.
it is. We He was raising at the time two grandkids, and so we got back together and uh, dated for about 5 years before he asked me to marry him. And I was like, oh,
Right. Do I want to do this again?
I don't know. No, it was really neat, the way God, brought us back together again as a family. And we were always in each other's lives, even when we were married to our first spouses.
Hmm.
We all went to church together. He sang at my wedding.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He sang and played the piano at my wedding.
Well, just so you know,
So,
I don't know if you know this or not, but I actually, my wife Holly, I performed her first wedding. I
yeah,
was there. Yeah. I mean, if that isn't as weird as it can get, I mean,
I
that's weird.
know. Yeah. Well, we always joke.
Never expected that.
Nope, nope. We always joke, says we're this big, weird, wonderful family. Well, the funny thing is that when he was raising his 2 grandkids, when he got them on his 50th birthday, they were 2 and 5.
Hmm.
And so his wife had already left the home, and his mother-in-law moves in with him. So his wife's mother moves in with him to help raise the kids. She'd stay
Wow.
during the week because he's still a full-time, had a business and was working full-time and needed help. And so when we started dating, his mother-in-law was living with him. His ex-mother-in-law was living with him. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, this is weird.
Yeah.
He's like,
We all think things are weird, but you can't, I tell you what, when people like his mother-in-law loved his children with their
oh,
grandparents and was there to help. And it's even though it's weird, it's like you can't you can't do away with love, man. When love is there, you gotta take it where you can get it.
yeah. And here's another funny thing about all of that is he had no biological children. My
Hmm.
husband, when he married his first wife, she already had 4 children.
Wow.
And so he didn't get married until he was 40 years old.
Hmm.
So he had no biological children. Funny thing is, we are actually distant cousins. We have,
Really?
yeah, we have the same great great grandmother. His great great grandmother had was married and had 2 children, and her husband died. My great great grandfather was married. He had 2 children. His wife died. They got together. They had 2 children together.
Hmm.
So his great grandparents grew up as half siblings with my great grandparents.
Wow. Small
I
world
know.
down there in Arkansas.
So the funny thing is, he had no biological children,
Hmm.
but he has biological grandkids, my grandkids.
Yeah.
Only in Arkansas, Rick.
That's
Only in
right.
Arkansas.
I don't know. We do pretty good here in the mountains of Western North Carolina.
Well, yes, I think y'all probably give us a
Yeah.
run for our money in
Yeah.
that
My wife
department.
says we don't call it a family tree, we call it a family wreath. She said it goes in a big circle and we're all somehow intertwined. So
Exactly.
that
Exactly. You know, his children, his oldest daughter babysat my girls when they were younger, you know. So
Wow.
there was always a connection, you know.
Yes.
And then we had a lovely wedding on the beach with all of our kids and our grandkids in 2013. And we always said we're this big, weird, wonderful family. And
Mhm.
somehow it just all worked and still works, you know,
Yeah.
even with him gone, it still all works.
I'm
And
very curious about something. So you said he was your Sunday school teacher at one time. You
mhm.
all went to the same church. Now, knowing what I know about where we all land, where we both land eschatologically, I know that probably wasn't the case way back when, right? So something
Oh, no.
something transpires, and I'm very curious if it was you or if it was Steve and how all this got introduced to you.
Well, it was definitely him.
Okay.
Um, after he went through his divorce, of course, you know, he was always a big studier. You know, he loved the Word of God. And we had a mutual friend that in our town, and he had come by to see Steve, just checking on him. You know, hey guy, hey friend, how you doing, and anything I can do for you. I don't know. You may have met him. He was at the Arkansas Eschatology Conference. His name's Mark Wiley.
I did. Yeah, I met him. I met Mark.
Yeah, good friend of ours.
Hmm.
And so Mark just didn't say anything, but he just leaves a little hokey looking track on Steve's table, and I think it was a John Bray track. I'm pretty sure it was a John Bray. And Steve
For
picks
those
it
of you
up.
guys who don't know, John Bray wrote Matthew 24 Fulfilled. It's one of my favorite
Yes.
books.
Yeah, mine
He was from
too.
Georgia. He was a Southern Baptist preacher.
And he
Hmm.
has ties to Magnolia, actually, where
Does
I
he?
was. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so, anyway, he picked it up and he read this little track and he's like, "What is this?"
Hmm.
And so that just kind of started it. You know, he and Mark had a few conversations and somehow, and this was we started dating again in '08.
Hmm.
And somehow this was like around the end of '07, maybe the beginning of '08, because we kind of started dating in August of '08. And so Mark and I had kind of gotten wind that Mark believed something weird, about the
Yes.
second coming. Because small town, and I'm like, whatever. I mean, I respect him. I'm not gonna, you know, say anything bad about Mark, but and then when Steve and I started dating, basically our Fridays were spent talking and watching a movie or reading the Bible together, studying the Bible together. And, he would kind of drop little hints about, well, what if I told you that, you know, Jesus has already come back? And I was like, okay, tell me more about that. And so, we got into some really good conversations and opened the Word of God. And he kind of threw out, uh, a lot of the time statements to me. And I mean, that was just totally foreign to me. I had never heard anything like that. But I will say, I wasn't, I wasn't like really into eschatology or anything like that. Um, it just never really crossed my mind to study that. The book of Revelations was like, just, keep it over there, you
That's
know,
right. Yes,
just,
absolutely. Same here.
just stay over there in that corner and I'll be fine. So, I never really gave eschatology much thought. Um, Now, of course, we went to a dispensationalist church, but I didn't know the words, what they were called. You know, I watched the Left Behind movies, and I don't know, maybe I never read books about eschatology. I would just see a movie or something. But yeah, that was how we were both introduced to eschatology. Him through Mark Wiley, and me, of course, through him. And then we started listening to David Curtis, Berean Bible, and this was, like I said, like in around 08, 09. And this is when I don't even think they were. I don't even think it was video. I think it was still just audio, from what I remember. And it was always a week later. Do you remember that? I don't know if you were
I
listening
wasn't
to.
around in those early
Oh,
days.
you weren't? Okay.
No,
You weren't. You didn't go back that far.
no.
Yeah, it was a week later. So what you were listening to that week was actually recording the previous week. And so, that was our Sunday morning. That's what we did on Sunday morning. And I'll never forget, we were at the beach. We decided to kind of take our whole family, our kids and grandkids that we had at the time. We just decided, let's just see how this is going to work, with everybody together. And so we decided to take them all to the beach, and so we did that. And we were sitting on the balcony one morning, and I was drinking my coffee, and he was having this Diet Coke. And again, these conversations would just come up randomly, and I would say, for some reason, one day I just in my mind thought, well, what about Israel? I was like,
Hmm.
so what's going to happen to Israel? And he was like, God's done with them. They're no different than they're not. They're not. They're just a they're just a nation like any other nation, and God's done with them. And they have to come into the kingdom just like everyone else does, through Christ, belief in
Hmm.
Christ. And I was like, because I was so hung up on, what about Israel? What's going to happen to them? Because, in my mind, they were it, you know.
Especially
There
since,
was,
from 1948 up to the present, it's the timeline, obviously we're 80 plus years away now,
oh
but, or almost to 80, I'll say. But you can only imagine from 1948 to 1988. I remember all of that stuff. And then up to 98, like those 40 or 50 years, it was a big deal. Great
yeah,
planet Earth. And
yeah,
like you said, and so of course, it would come to the forefront of our mind. We were taught how important Israel was to the story. The fact,
right,
can a nation be born in a day? And they're going to like, yes, it did. It happened in 1948. And so it just fit right into the narrative that we were being taught. And so, of course, we were concerned. I had ministers standing up there saying, if you don't take care of Israel, if you don't bless Israel, God's going to curse you. I mean, I was told that all the time. So I was like, all right, I guess I better be helping Israel somehow. And I wasn't doing anything. I was just going to church and saying they were okay. But to hear that they're just like any other nation,
yeah.
whoa, that was a big deal. I was hung up on that for a while too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a big thing for me, because, they were God's holy people. They were the apple of God's eye. They were the one God was going to rebuild his physical kingdom through. And of course, in my mind, I could say all that, but I really didn't. I mean, it wasn't like it meant that much to me. It wasn't like I was out there, campaigning for Israel or anything like that.
Right.
But, I would get these from, get that from just preachers, pounding it in you and that kind of thing. Uh, and I always went to what I consider a dispensational church. Uh, but, you know, as I've learned more and I've studied more myself, and I see more of the covenantal, aspect of eschatology. And thank God for people like you and David Curtis and Zach, and just so many people that have really helped my understanding and things along those lines. We did a Bible study in our home. We probably started it around 2016, I believe, 15 or 16. And my husband Steve would put these little notes and write these little things on Facebook. And he was a wonderful writer, and he was such a great communicator with his thoughts and what God was showing him. And so he would put those things out there, and nothing too over the top dispensational or anything, but just things to kind of make you start wondering, and what do you mean? I'd like to hear more about that. And so we started a Bible study in our home. And it was funny because there were times when we had more people in our Bible study than David Curtis had in his church on Sunday morning.
Wow.
We kind of laughed about that. But God just really used that Bible study uh, for me, especially. I think. I mean, I I was just, and I still have those Facebook. I videoed it, and we would do it on a um, Facebook group page, a private page, and I still have those teachings that he did. And oh my goodness, they're just precious to me
Boy, I would love
now.
to see those. I would love to
Oh,
see those.
they are. They're just precious. And I go back and I'll listen. I need to find a way to get them off of there because I don't
Mhm.
ever want to lose them. And I'm not a big Facebook
I can
person.
help
So,
you. I can help you get
oh,
those. I'll
oh,
absolutely help you get them, and we'll get them. We're
thank
going to
you.
so that you'll have them. Let's
Oh,
do that.
thank you. And it was kind of, my husband, he would start with just something small, like time statements or just something like that. And, just things that would make you pique your curiosity. And I mean, before, when it was all said and done, before he passed away, we had started the book of Hebrew. And it was so refreshing and such a wonderful thing to see people's, their whole um, understanding light up, you know, and so God just really used that time to really help people see, the ones that He brought into our home, to help them see the fulfilled eschatology that's
Yeah, the book of Hebrews.
all over the Bible,
It is in the book of
all over.
Hebrews. I started a study on the burrows called "It's Time to Grow Up,"
Yes, I remember that,
and it
and
never
I was so
finishes.
excited. I was like, "Oh, yay.
And
I'm
just
going
so
to
you
have some good
know,
material."
so we're yeah, well, fortunately Zach Davis did a great study on it, and so everybody can go see Zach's. We even tried to bring in Zach's teaching and talk about it. And I discovered really quickly in the burrows, if you've got a futurist view, you can't understand Hebrews
Right,
in the light that we're looking at it from.
right.
When a very, very little while he will, you know,
Well, and here's the thing.
not
I think
delay.
you can only understand Hebrews if you view it from a fulfilled eschatology perspective. I wrestled with the book of Hebrews all my life, that I was interested in trying to understand it. And I would read Hebrews. I was like, what in the world? I mean, it was like you're just bouncing all over the place.
Hmm.
And I think I've told someone this before. I'm like, every time someone gets saved, we want to point them to the book of John. And I'm like, we need to be pointing them to the book of Hebrews, because if
Yes.
you understand the book of Hebrews and the covenantal change that's taking place there, you 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 that's just the whole Bible. in
It
my
really
opinion.
is. I heard now there's a guy by the name of James White, and he's not a preterist, but he said something that really resounded with me. He said, if you read the book of Hebrews, it sounds a lot like Acts and the book of Luke, but the doctrine sounds a lot like Paul. And he said, so some believe that it was Luke taking down notes of a sermon that Paul gave, most likely the one that he did when Eutychus fell 3 stories down and died. But it was a long. But if you think about it that way, it's really interesting because if anybody had an understanding as a Pharisee, it was Paul. And so when I read the book of Hebrews, it's like I hear Paul's voice preaching to a congregation in a home somewhere and telling them, look, all of these guys that are around you that are trying to get you to come back to Judaism, you cannot neglect this great salvation that we have. We cannot go back to that. This is about to vanish away. It's becoming
Yeah.
obsolete. It's the end. And he talks about going through the hardships of these men in faith when you get to Hebrews 11 and all this. Like, it makes so much sense from a fulfilled view. It totally does. It opens up. And that's why I called it It's Time to Grow Up. Like, hey, let's actually look at this for what it says and put it in its proper context. But I couldn't do it. It was ripping their minds out. They just couldn't handle it. So I'll go back to it again myself and probably finish the study. Zach did a wonderful, marvelous job. But you're right. If we're going to point somebody to something, the book of Hebrews is who we should point it to. Point them to.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it just really explains so much. And I mean, you do have to really dig deep um, when you study the book of Hebrews. One thing that, and I'm trying to think, let me see, uh, there was a,
For those of
where,
you who can't see her and you're
uh,
listening, Shan is actually turning in her physical Bible so that she can tell us something, which is great.
well, like I said, Hebrews is just, it's just full of so much richness. And where Paul talks about, I want to explain all of this stuff to you, but you know, you're not grown up enough, you know.
Hmm.
You're still in kindergarten and you need to be graduated by now
It's
and
time to
teaching
grow
others.
up.
It's time to grow up.
That's right.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And of course, that resonates with me because I mean, I literally have felt like all my spiritual life, my Christian life, I've just stayed in kindergarten the whole time.
Me too.
And so there's a verse in here. He says, uh talking about, well, he's talking about, how he's wanting to tell them about Jesus as the high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And he's saying, I really I want to tell you more about this, but it's hard to explain since you've become dull of hearing.
Hmm.
And, we talk about practical application in the Bible as a preterist. Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to understand it and trying to figure it out that we forget about
How
the
to live.
how to live through it and by
Yes.
it. And so, that dull of hearing, it's a Greek word, and I'm probably going to mess it up. I think it's called nothros or something like that. And it basically means you're not pushing yourself to try and understand. You know, you're not pushing yourself enough mentally to try and understand this. And so this past year, that just resonated with me in my own personal life. Is you need to push yourself harder in the Word of God. I need
Hmm.
to really um, buckle down and get serious about understanding the Word of God, because I think we can understand the Word of God. I think we can connect those dots that seem to be, so far apart from each other, that because that's how I was as a Christian all my life. Like, well, I'll just let someone else
Right.
figure it out. Figure it out.
Yeah, we're
You know,
we're like we're the kind, or like I used to say, like I'm the kind that kept the pews warm. I would sit
yes,
there and warm those pews and let everybody else tell me what I needed to believe instead of studying it for
exactly.
myself and then believing it because I've read it and understand it and the Lord's shown me. No,
Right.
yeah, those days are over. I'm not warming pews anymore.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not either. I'm warming a recliner every Sunday morning.
So I'm very curious, Shan. Um, your husband Steve, I know I learned just how important he was to David Curtis, just because David spoke about him at length while he was sick.
Yeah.
And so I'm very curious for you what it's like to go through having someone that you love so much that you've had this long history with over time. And then yeah, I'm not trying to go like all Barbara Walters sad on you here, but I'm just very, I'm genuinely very curious.
Yeah.
What is that like to be with someone that is going through that, knowing what we know about the Lord and understanding, that this is natural and this is what happens, but talk to me a little bit about that. What that was like for you because you both have a fulfilled view. You understand what we have
Mhm.
and wondering about what is beyond here, beyond this life. Talk to me a little bit about that. What was that like
Yeah.
for you?
Well, it brings me an immense amount of peace,
Mm,
in my life. And it did in his life too when he was here. Just that fulfilled eschatology, understanding. Um, it really, the hope that we had has already arrived.
hmm
Um, and when this life is over, we're face to face with Jesus.
hmm
Um, and he believed the word of God with all of his heart. He had faith in this gospel and the the fulfilled view of that it's all been accomplished. And and so he knew immediately when he died he was going to go to be with the Lord. And that was the peace, that he had, and that I had too. Um, Steve was Steve was a unique person, and very loving, generous, caring. Um, David Curtis was one of his dear friends, and we never. I mean, we went years before we even met David and Kathy, and they just had this bond, this friendship, that was so beautiful to see and to watch. And Steve would call David on many, many occasions, all the time, and say, "Well, what about this? Well, what about this?"
Right, of
And
course.
and I'm sure you've done the same thing,
Oh, yes.
you know. Uh, and so, they had a wonderful friendship, and it literally broke David's heart. And when he got sick, and they came to our home, and they just, Dave and Kathy and Robin, Cindy, some other dear friends that live here in Arkansas, and they came to our homes when he was sick, and they just showered us with their love.
hmm
Um, you know, it was just um, such a blessing to us, and to me, to see that he just literally loved David Curtis. You know,
hmm Oh, and
um,
you know what? I do too. I have grown so fond of David and Kathy Curtis. I love
yeah,
them with my whole heart, and nothing will change that. And the
no,
heartache that they've been through this year, and
yeah,
as you know, and yeah, I love them so much, and I feel for them so much, and I know that if I was hurting or you were hurting or whatever, they would be there for us, and that's what they
oh,
do. And
oh, no doubt they have been.
hmm
Uh, you know, people are always like, "Where do you go to church?" I'm like, "Well, I home church," and they're
hmm
like, "That's kind of weird," but I'm like, "Oh, I have the most wonderful pastors." You
hmm
know, I have the most wonderful pastors who are friends who would be there for me at the drop of a hat,
Yeah.
and they were and still
hmm
are. But the grief part, I don't, I know you've had a lot of loss in your life here recently.
Mm-hmm.
And, I lost my sister a month before Steve passed away,
Mm-hmm.
my older sister. And then Steve passed away a month after that. And so, it hit me, pretty hard there. And, but there's a lot of things that grief can do. It can sidetrack you for one thing. It can derail your whole day to day, just getting up and trying to maneuver your life without someone there. That's just hard in and of itself. But then there's so many things that you're not getting to experience with them. And
Right.
we've had grandkids and great grandkids since Steve's been gone in the 4 years, almost 4 years that he's been gone, and
Mm-hmm.
just all those things. And our family is unique in the sense that we're still a blended family, even though he's not here.
Mm-hmm.
He was the thing that blended us all together, you know.
Right.
And but even though he's still not here, we're still just a beautiful, weird, wonderful family that love each other dearly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we rejoice when and we include his memory every chance we can in just our day to day lives, the things that we do in marriages and new grandbabies, and
Mm-hmm.
you know. So,
Well, I think
but
that it's, go ahead.
well, I was going to say it is hard not having someone that was so powerful in our family.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that in a good way. You know, he was
Right.
such a presence in our family. Everybody would be like, well, what would Pop do? Well, what would Pop say? you know, what would Pop think? You know,
Right.
uh, and he was just a good grandfather. He was a great father, wonderful husband.
Mm-hmm.
He was a spiritual leader in our
Mm-hmm.
family. Even our kids um, who don't believe, who may not be full preterists, but they see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that he believed, and they understand in certain ways what he believed. Funny story, he actually sat down with our son-in-law's friends who are mostly pastors, and I would say probably from the Reformed partial preterist camp. And he said, guys, just let me have 30 minutes of your time, you know. And so he laid it all out, everything he believed, everything he saw, he laid it all out. And they looked at him and said, you know, I see that. I can see all of that, and this would change everything.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
right.
it would, but
And it does.
it does change everything, you know.
So, so where does that leave you as we're about to close out this testimony? What are you doing now? What you got going on? I plan on coming and seeing you
I
very
want you
soon.
to. I want you to. I would
Mm-hmm.
love it. I would love it. Um, Rick, life is full, and it always will be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad for that. I'm grateful to God for that. We have 18 grandkids and
That'll
four
keep you busy.
four great grandkids, another one on the way.
Mm.
And the you know, I've I've kind of since Steve has passed away, I've left Magnolia where we lived, where we both raised our kids, and I've left Magnolia. I moved to our cabin that we were going to move to and settle down at anyway at some point. And my girls live in the central part of Arkansas, and so they're in the throes of raising their kids, and They're like, Mom, we need you. So I'm blessed in the sense that I could just get up and leave and move here, help my girls, be close to my grandkids. And Steve has a son that lives 40 miles north of me, and they have 6 children. And so I just get to enjoy my kids and my grandkids. And everybody's like, "Where in the world is Nanny?" Because I'm just everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm
You're a nanny on the
everywhere.
move. Nanny on the
I'm a
move.
nanny. I'm a nanny on the move, and that was our life when Steve was here with us, with me, and that was our life. We were just on the move constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's been great. And
Well,
then God's led me to people like Rob and Cindy, who are dear, Erwin, who live here, who are dear friends, Marchessa, who is
mm-hmm.
a dear friend of mine. He's just given me so many friendships that I know that, you know, I will cherish forever until God calls me home.
Yeah, that's one of the things about this community that I've discovered is that
Oh,
this distance means nothing.
nothing.
We wish we could see each other more, but it doesn't stop us from being close and talking to one another and keeping
Yeah,
this community
yeah.
going.
We've had gatherings. We've had gatherings here in my home.
Hmm.
We've met at restaurants, and hopefully next month, when I hope you get to come,
Yeah, I'm
uh,
gonna try.
we're going to try and have another gathering. People are longing for fellowship,
Hmm.
um, but they're longing for fellowship with people that understand what they believe,
Hmm.
and uh, you feel like you can talk about it. You feel like you can share what God's teaching you and showing you through His Word. And so people are really longing for that. And if God's got me here to be able to open up my home to other people who want to come and share, great. I'm
Yeah.
all for it. I'm all
Well, I'd
for
like to bring you out here to Western North Carolina too to
it.
let you
Oh,
go around
well,
these mountains.
I should have worn my Carolina t-shirt because I'm a
Mm.
huge Tar Heel fan.
Oh, now we're talking. You're a
I'm
Tar
a
Heel fan.
I'm a basketball Tar Heel fan. I'm not much
Yes.
on it, but Roy Williams was oh man, he was my favorite coach in the world.
It's really funny. Roy Williams his home's only 20 minutes from where I live and
Really?
in Black Mountain area. And then also, yeah, he grew up around here. As a matter of fact, there's a little greenhouse over here, that he comes and used to frequent all the time. Yeah. And
Cool.
yeah, yeah, it's very localized here. But of course, he was in Kansas for a long time and then he came
Yes.
back and
Well, I kind of followed him. I don't
yeah,
follow basketball players. I usually follow the coaches. So I kind
right.
of followed him from Kansas to North Carolina way back in the day. And
Yes.
but oh yeah, I'm a huge Tar Heel fan. So
Yeah. Well,
if you got any connections,
got some connections. I can get if you want to go. Now, I used to be a Duke fan a long time ago, and then I quit. That's a long story, but I became a Tar Heel fan from there on out. And
yeah,
but I love their basketball program. I have
me
football. This whole thing with anyway, we won't talk about that. But Shan, it's been such a joy for me to actually get to see you and talk to you, and thank you for sharing
too.
your testimony. And yes,
You are so sweet.
I hope to see you in January, or in the beginning of the year. I hope to come out and see you then. And are you going to try to make the trip out to the conference this year?
I am.
Well, the tickets are on sale. I don't even know that. They've went on
I've
sale.
already, I've
Look
already
at
got
you. You
mine.
already
I've
got
already
yours.
got it. I've
Guys,
already got it.
if you haven't got your tickets, you better get them. I think they said there's
That's
already been
right.
40 or 50 have already sold. So over 50% of them are gone.
Oh yeah, and hotels. I mean, be sure and get the
Get your
hotel too,
hotel.
and the Arkansas Eschatology Conference in August.
That's
So
right. I will
yeah,
be
so
there too.
hopefully, oh good,
Hmm.
good. So I know at least 3 times this year that I'm going to get to see you.
Yeah, same here. I can't wait. I'm excited.
Me too.
Well, Stan, you've been a blessing. Thank you so much
Um,
for being on the Burrows. It means a lot to me.
oh, thank you, Rick, for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, guys, appreciate you being here and listening. And we'll talk to you guys again next time on the Burrows of Bria. Peace out.